I have no idea how this is gonna go. I'm gonna try to do like a rant style video where I just start with a blank canvas and just talk about a certain topic. I might just get super off task, but we're gonna try it anyways. So I want to talk about over spiritualization, which is like I think somewhat of a problem in the church. This usually looks like an insist like a over obsession with like like the Holy Spirit, like the gifts of the Spirit, the charismatic stuff. It also like oftentimes comes in the face of like people saying like everything is demonic, like everything's demonic. Usually there's like somehow like mental health is demonic and it's a problem. And I'm not a fan of this, but I figure I kind of just want to like talk a little bit about my perspective on it because like I'm non-denom. And in non-denominational churches, that there obviously there's quite a bit of variation within the churches, but like for the most part, they tend to be somewhat like Baptist-costal. I learned that term from Redeem Zoomer's Discord, which basically just means they're Baptist theology. They just happen to also usually be continuationists. Continuationists are just people who believe that the charismatic gifts, which are like healing. Like healing isn't physically like laying your hands on someone, like as a spiritual gift, not like God healing people. That's different. Prophecy. That's not how you spell it. Whoa. That's prophecy. And like tongues. Tongues is always like the one people go to the most. People love to talk about tongues. It's, fun topic. So I'm a continuationist, though. I do think that the spiritual gifts are for today, but I do think that they are not as prevalent as they would be in like biblical times. And the main thing is because like I've experienced speaking in tongues. I've experienced like, these other things as well. To like varying extents. I can't necessarily claim like oh everything was like a spiritual gift. Because like again, it's kind of tricky because are you doing it as a spiritual gift or is it God doing it from prayer or something? Because I consider that a little bit of a different thing. I feel like some do as well. I think a lot of people go a little bit too far with the spiritual gifts. Like obviously you have like hyper charismatic groups. You have like hyper charismatic groups that just go like way over here and like they're just like speaking in tongues and like getting slain in the spirit like that stuff's like really and like some might even go as far as to like consider this like whoops let me write. Okay. Consider this like similar to salvation or something like that. It's a big problem. All right. It's a big problem. I think most Pentecostal churches, a lot of people assume that's what they are. I don't think that's really the case. Most of them, I think, are actually pretty reasonable. The old church, I still kind of attended. It's the closest one. So if I'm going with family, I'll usually go to that one. Compared to my new church, they're non-denominational. They're part of Assemblies of God, which is a Pentecostal-ish group. They're basically just like non-denom usually. They just like are usually more firm in their ideology, but within the fellowship. But they're usually fairly loose on it. For some reason, also this specific church is like they're much more Pentecostal in the youth group than they are on the weekends, which I've always kind of found interesting. Like I have a lot of problems with the youth group. I could probably write like a 10-page essay explaining all the problems I had with it. It's not like the worst thing in the world. Most of the issues are not like theological. It's just like stop focusing on the pre-sermon games that no one actually cares about and all that jazz. Like I'm here for small groups. Give us more time for small groups. But instead they waste like 10 minutes doing some stupid game. Whatever. I digress. See that this is what happens when I rant. So, but like Pentecostalism, I think that some people go a little bit too far. Some people try to tie in this whole like spiritual gifts into like everything, every aspect of their faith, and like this like and the like what this could eventually lead to is like this like idea of like of like like if you have more faith then you'll get healed or something like that. Like I've know people who like have like a medical condition and they're like And I've been told by people that if I had more faith, then I would be healed. But like because I'm not healed, I must not have faith or something like that. It's ridiculously abusive at that point. I think so. Yeah, huge huge problem. Really bad when you get to that sort of level. And then this also kind of goes into kind of the whole like demonic aspect. Like some people, like everything is demonic. Like mental health is like I don't know how this ended up, but like a lot of people will like say like mental health is just actually like demonic oppression, which is like I think now I think it's naive to remove this as a possibility, but I think that to automatically call it that I don't think is going to help people as much as other forms such as therapy. I think the church, or some churches, not all churches, but some churches I think just focus so much on like, oh, just work on your spiritual health and get more faith, and then you'll be set free. And I do know people who have been set free from mental health issues through prayer and submitting to God, but I just think that this idea that it is somehow an inherent spiritual issue is I think a problem. I think mental health is just like showcasing how we're in a fallen world. Like big problem. We're in a fallen world, mental health, and I think that we shouldn't assume it's demonic. I think that the smart thing to do is to that it is assume that we'll just say something. Oh, I did it again. No. Like assume that like something happens and we're just gonna assume that's not spiritual until we can like say without a doubt that it is. So, for example, I would even in like maybe in some cases you can claim it. Like some people like will say like praise God for helping me win my football game, something like that. And of course, like the atheists are just like, oh, you just worked hard and got good at the game. And I think in that situation, like you can claim that there was. It's hard to claim that God was the reason that you won the game, but God definitely gave you the gift. God gave you the gift to perform well. And if you're giving him the glory, then I have no problem with that. I think we need more of that. And honestly, I've been kind of surprised about how many, especially NFL football players, have been open about their faith. I mean, C.J. Stroud like mentions his faith like in every interview, assuming he doesn't get censored online. That's a thing. So that's fun. But yeah, just assume. I think it's just smart. Just assume it's not spiritual. Of course, like God is sovereign, so I mean, you can technically claim anything is supernatural because of that. Like, you can even complain what? Um, you can even claim that like things that are natural are actually supernatural because they were created by God. Because God created using the supernatural, everything is in some sense supernatural, and therefore, and therefore you can claim any like every itty bitty coincidence is somehow like from God or from like demons or something like that. I think it's a little bit absurd. Of course, like some cases, like it's fine. Like you prayed to God, oh, I lost my, I don't know, ring. I lost my like precious ring or like whatever I got from my grandma. Where help me God, and then you find it. Like in that situation, was it a convenience that you just happened to find it again, or was it God? I don't really know. So in like you can give thanks to God in that situation. God is sovereign. God maybe intended for that to happen, or God did intend for that for happen. Depending on your perspective of God's sovereignty, that gets into like Calvinistic and predestination stuff, which I don't want to get into right now. I'm not super knowledgeable about that stuff. I just I don't know. My view kind of is that predestination exists, like, but like it should have absolutely no impact on how we live our lives. And I do think that we at least have some level of independence from God's predestination, whether that's like perceived faith or something like that. Um, I don't know. It's kind of tricky. I haven't looked too much into the views of the theology of that, but again, that's kind of a different issue here. So mental health is tricky. Just going back to that, like this is why I'm writing this down, so I at least have some reference of what I was talking about. So mental health is tricky. because I think there are a lot of situations where it is some sort of demonic oppression. Like, for example, like I read about like schizophrenia, and like some of those symptoms do sound like it is demonic oppression, but can we really claim that? Or is it just some sort of like just natural mental disorder, and that's just how it is being in a fallen world? It's kind of tricky, but I think in cases of mental health, I think that we should, as a church, encourage people to get help from like a therapist's, or like, maybe not like a professional therapist, but even like sometimes a strong church community could be exactly what that person needs. I don't know. I'm not like a psychology expert or anything like that, so I don't know exactly, but like I'm pretty confident that community with a good people is going to help with mental health issues. I think that that just makes general sense. Yeah, so church just this over spiritualization thing is just a big problem, honestly. We need to just focus, just be smart. I think that so many Christians love to like, even in some cases where like they're like, if you're like, they just will like disregard anything an atheist says, because they're an atheist and they have a different worldview. I think that's unwise. I don't think we have to accept everything they say with like 100% certainty. We have to obviously use discernment. To use discernment, something spelt something like that in order to like figure it out, and I don't know. Spiritual warfare is definitely real, but we just have to be smart about it. I think honestly, being so obsessed with making everything spiritual just makes you look dumb. Looks dumb. It makes it kind of challenging. I mean, like the general world perception that I see is that like somehow Christians are like, or like anti-intellectual, or um like anti science is another one that you see a lot. That's basically just every conservative at this point, something like that. And like this is one of the things that I think just like hurts the over spiritualization. It's one of the things that hurts people's perceptions of Christians and gets us to this conclusion. I also think that I mean, I think that the creation issue is the main reason people think these things. But just because of that, I'm leaning more and more towards old Earth creationism as the more I like study, mostly because it makes apologetics a lot, um makes apologetics, I think, a lot easier, and it'd be kind of interesting to. I think a lot of internet atheists, especially, which like are not like your big name that actually do debates, like a lot of internet atheists are under this delusion that like all Christians believe in a young Earth, and then like the moment that they're like a Christian who's an old Earth creationist steps in front of them, they kind of like they freak out because it goes against what they've been told. Internet atheists are stupid. Internet Christians are also stupid. Like if you're like a comment section warrior on Instagram or whatever social media, chances are you've used a bad argument. I try not to read the comments. When I do, I usually end up cringing at that type of stuff. It's just unproductive arguments. I generally think like the atheist versus Christian arguments are kind of stupid, because I don't think they accomplish like anything. The only times it'll ever like convince someone one way or the other is if they're like on the bench. And like I kind of like came up with this idea called like the like implicit stalemate. That's what I call it, of like this debate, which is the idea that one group is anti-supernatural or has an anti-supernatural bias, the other group has a pro-supernatural bias, and because of that line, most things just go completely past people. Of course, like that basically implicit statement is just like your faith. Do you have faith in the unseen, or there's a lot of different ways you can define it. But I think that like it's very important to be critical, I think, and just like assume everyone knows something you don't. Listen to the other perspectives. If it's explicitly unbiblical, then in that situation, then you can probably disregard it. But like assume, I think it's just smart to assume you're wrong, and then try to prove that you are right. And I think that at least for a lot of people, they may find that they're wrong more often than they are right in some situations. I don't really know. I'm a very critical person. I think of everything critically. That's probably why my faith is so strong as it is because I've been so critical. Like all of like the big questions, the questions that like stump people up on their faith, like why does God allow evil and that stuff. Like those are questions like I've pondered like especially like in the last like 2 to 3 years. And now I think I'm just much stronger in my faith than before, even though like someone could like ask the exact same questions and end up leaving the faith. It's quite interesting, and I think that subjective experience plays a massive role within this, which doesn't necessarily mean that because experience is subjective doesn't necessarily mean that one group is right. I don't think that the existence of this like insists that someone's right, someone's wrong. I think that one person is right, and I don't know if this is not evidence of which side. I guess is what I'm trying to say. I'm kind of just rambling. What was it? Oh yeah, spiritualization. Don't over spiritualize. Just be smart. Assume it's not spiritual unless you can do nothing else, and don't be afraid to like seek out advice or seek help from people that may not agree with you on every little itty bitty thing.